which is in northern Ohio, if you're unfamiliar with the counties in Ohio. And this is a 4-H program. I've been doing this since the middle of March. Every Friday, we take a different field trip, and been a lot of different places. Hopefully, we'll keep doing this for quite some time as well. So I have disabled chat, and I have disabled the your microphones right now. At the end, I'll give some time and I'll enable chat so you can ask any questions if you have any questions. So if any questions come up as I go along, feel free to jot those down and remember them so we can remember them at the end. The interesting part about the Great Wall of China, so it's pretty great, right? We've probably all heard about it, and we've seen pictures of it. The cool thing about this field trip is that we're going to see kind of a more of an in-depth look at the Great Wall of China. As you can see, this is the best picture to show this. If you look all the way as far as the eye can see, you can see that Great Wall still going, weaving in and out of the mountains all over the peaks and valleys, and it goes all the way over there. 5,500 miles, 5,500 miles of wall make up the Great Wall of China. It's pretty amazing. The Great Wall of China is actually made from several different materials. It's made from stone and brick and mud, and even, some people might not realize this, it's actually even made with some wood as well. Most people think that the Great Wall of China is all stone and or brick, but it's actually, there's wood underneath some of these structures as well. The Chinese people call it the Long Fortress. The reason why they call it the Long Fortress is because that's exactly what it is. We think of forts as perfectly square little buildings with a wall all the way around 4 sides, and that's what we generally think of as forts. A lot of the forts that are still standing in the United States are 4 square forts, and this is not. There's not a definite inside and outside. It's a long wall, but it is a fort. It was actually, the construction began in the 3rd century BCE, and it took a long time to build it. The Great Wall of China actually stretches along the north and west end of China. It doesn't go all the way around China. So it just goes on the north and west end. If it were to go all the way around China, it would be even more massive than it already is. This is also, a lot of Chinese people call it it looks like the spine of a sleeping dragon. And it kind of does look like that, where it weaves in and out on the tops of the mountains, on the mountain peaks, and it kind of looks like a spine on some of these. If we were to see it from the top down, more from the top down, it's even more prevalent that it kind of looks like a spine of a dragon. In 1987, the Great Wall of China became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And now it's protected, and there's a lot of work done. A lot of upkeep and maintenance is done for the Great Wall because it's 5,500 miles. So there's a lot of maintenance and upkeep for a 5,500 mile wall. So the section that we're on, a lot of people think that the Great Wall is one continuous Great Wall. You could literally start at one end and walk all the way to the other end on top of what you kind of see it right there, on top of these walkways. It's not quite like that. There are sections. And so what happened when this wall was being built, different empires constructed different sections. And so we're going to kind of go through the major sections of the wall in this field trip. But the section that you're looking at right now is one of the best represented sections, because it kind of shows the combination between old and new. And if you were to visit the Great Wall of China in person, this would be a really good place to start to be able to explore the Great Wall. This is called the Jinshanling section. The Jinshanling section, as I said, has a combination of both new and old. It's about, the Jinshanling section is about 87 miles northeast of Beijing, China, which of course we all know is the capital of China. And the cool part is this, they've kept a lot of this, the Jinshanling section looking like it looked in the 3rd century BCE when it was built. But then they've also updated a lot of it as well, and they've kind of made it into a tourist attraction. If you were on the, let's see, Machu Picchu in Peru, we took a trip about a month or so ago, actually it's been now, to Machu Picchu. And Machu Picchu talked about a lot, I talked about a lot in Machu Picchu, where a lot of visitors visit Machu Picchu, and a lot of that, they're having a really big problem with the deterioration of that area because of all the visitors that it has. The Great Wall of China is the same way. If you can imagine, this structure is ancient. I mean, it's thousands of years old, and it's really hard to keep up. And with all of the traffic that it sees, the foot traffic that people are in, and you can actually see in this picture that we show right here, some people that have kind of gone over the side of the footpath, and they're exploring down there. That's where that's allowed. People can do that, but it sometimes hurts the structure a little bit. So they have some areas where it's a really nice concrete path or a stone path, and you kind of follow that. And then some areas is a little bit more rustic, where it might just be a dirt path, or it might just be some stones laid down. Like most other tourist attractions, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes with modern tourist attractions. There's souvenir shops. You could ride a zip line at the Great Wall of China, and there's a bunch of specialty shops selling little trinkets and stuff of the Great Wall of China, and that's how a lot of people don't feel that's right, because it kind of deflates the history of that, where it's all commercialism. But a lot of that does pay to be able to restore pieces like this. So it's always historical sites usually have some sort of gift shop, and it's usually a good thing to get stuff. People feel like it's a commercialization of a historical site, but most of the time, a lot of times, that historical site gets money from those little trinkets and stuff that you buy. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's just a business, but sometimes it does do that. So this section of the Jinshanling is also one of the newer sections, and when I say one of the newer sections, it's very, very old. It's way before any of the United States was around. This section was being built. This section was started being built in the 1300s. So if we know American history, the United States started in the 1700s, 1776. In the 1600s, there were some settlers. In the 1500s, there were some other settlers, and of course, the Native Americans were around in those times. But a lot of modern there's not a lot of modern stuff that's still standing in the United States from way back when the Native Americans were the only people on this land. So it's interesting. It's amazing to think that this structure was built in the 1300s. It's just incredible that it's even still standing. And of course, the Jinshanling section is only 7 miles long, which is a pretty good hike if you want to take the whole section. But it's just a real small section, because remember, the whole Great Wall is 5,500 miles long. So it's just a very small section. Next up, we're going to go check out one of the towers of the Great Wall. And here you can kind of see a really good example of that. And so you can climb up to the top of that tower. I'm not sure if it's open. You could probably go inside. And in this particular tower that we're looking at right now is the highest point in the Great Wall. And you can also, if you don't want to climb, you can pay a fee, and you can. They have a cable car that will actually take you up to the summit. Once again, one of those things that that modern tourism can bring is the cable car. On a clear day, you can actually see, which you can tell is it's a little, looks like it might be dusk when they took these pictures, and you really can't see very good. And plus, if we watch the news about China, China has a lot of air pollution, so a clear day in China is very hard to come by. But on a clear day, it's actually been said that you can see all the way to Beijing from this tower, which is pretty awesome. And it's also neat because this is a really good example of how they really thought of everything when they were making it into a fort, and they really wanted it to be protective. So if you look on the left side of that picture, up the steps, every so often, about every 6 steps, there's a landing, and there's a wall, and there's a hole in the middle of that wall. And then over on the other side, if we could see the other side, there's another hole on the other side over there too. And that section, that flat part, is actually where guards would stand, and they would have weapons that would be able to protect the area from anybody that would come by. Now, if you're thinking about the time period when this wall was built, 3rd century BCE. So 3rd century BCE, there weren't humongous armies. There weren't humongous armies with huge, big pieces of equipment or anything. Most of this wall was actually built to protect against nomads. And nomads are wanderers. They don't really have a home. They just kind of wander, and they stay wherever they end up. And so the interesting part about this whole structure was built to keep nomads out of China. So the nomads would wander around most of this area. The Mongolian Empire is really to the north of China. So a lot of Mongolia was formed by nomadic people. And so these nomads would kind of wander around, and they'd get to China, and they'd go into China, and Beijing was around then, and it was a large city, and they can go into China, and they could start a life, if they didn't want to be nomads anymore. China didn't want this. And so that's why the Great Wall was built, to keep the nomads out of China, and to keep the whole country really protected from anybody that would just be kind of wandering around. So this wall, the Great Wall of China, is actually divided into 9 defensive zones. This is one of the defensive zones. The tower here is one of the defensive zones, and they're known as they're known as border garrisons. And so a garrison, the term garrison, we use that term in American history as well. A garrison is much like a stronghold. It's much like it's kind of another name for a fort. Garrisons usually store a lot of equipment and a lot of weaponry. Same thing with this. That's what the towers were used for. And I believe the towers, they go under that tower too. There's a like a basement, or many basements actually, function underneath those towers too. So it's not just that section that you see on top. There's stuff that goes underneath of it as well. So if you look over here in the distance, you actually see at least three more towers. So this is an amazing statistic. It's incredible how many. If I were to guess how many towers there are along the Great Wall of China, how many of these garrison towers there are around the Great Wall of China, I would guess maybe a couple hundred. It's 5,500 miles long, so maybe a couple hundred. There are 25,000 towers built along the Great Wall of China. 25,000 towers. And most of the towers were built at the high places, and they're positioned at the highest point of the mountaintops, of the summits. And a lot of the towers were called signal towers or beacons, because military guards would use various methods such as fire, lanterns, or guns or flags to signal other guarded towers when danger was ahead. So if there's a group of if there's a group of Mongolians coming through and they're trying to break the wall in one place, the tower down at the very end, a few hundred miles away, might shoot up a. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be what we think of as a flare these days, but it's a fireball or smoke, and depending on what it is, depending on what they're how they work that out, that tower would now know that, hey, there's somebody coming in down there, you better look out down here. And then they would shoot up their signal, and same thing, and it would just go down the line, and that's how they would protect these towers. Also, if we look over here, there's actually, you can kind of see over in the distance, this is a pass. So obviously, you can't have a wall without some kind of entrance or some sort of pass. And so there are also passes in addition to the towers, there were usually passes at some of the key places. Sometimes they'd be beside a tower, sometimes they'd be not quite in the side of the tower. The walls or ramparts, which is an old term that we know, the Star Spangled Banner. Remember, there's a lyric in the ramparts, and many of these passes were surfaced with large bricks or stones, and they're filled with dirt or crushed stones. On top of the ramparts, on top of the walls, were smaller walls that allowed soldiers to look out while still remain protected. These passes had ramps or doors or other sorts of access points that were designed for horses and soldiers and other merchants and civilians. Because if you remember, if you think about this, the Chinese people had to get out. The point of this was to keep people out of China. It wasn't to keep the Chinese people in. So there had to be a flow in and out of this wall. So much like other forts with huge doors and entrances, the Great Wall of China also had those. So here's a really good example, side profile of what one of the walls would look like, and this one's actually in really good shape too. This is the walls, of course, were the most important part of the defense system. The walls stood on average about 20 feet tall, about 20 to 21 feet tall, and they actually rose to the average height was about 25 feet tall. Some of the walls were a little bit, I don't think they went under 20 feet. Most of them were 20 to 25 feet tall, and they were constructed, as I said, with bricks and stone and mud and wood and a lot of other building materials. So interesting little fun fact, the building of the Great Wall of China actually made one of our best tools for construction came out of the Great Wall of China. And I bet you would never guess it. If you guessed a wheelbarrow, you were right. So the wheelbarrow, the modern wheelbarrow with a bucket and a wheel came out of the construction of the Great Wall of China, because they needed a way to get the mud and the dirt and the bricks from one place to another. And as you know, 5,500 miles, it's a long way. Even the stretches of the most of the sections are 7 to 10 miles a piece. So if you're building one section, that's still 7 to 10 miles. That's a long way. So they invented the wheelbarrow, and the wheelbarrow was we can thank the Chinese for the invention of the wheelbarrow, and it's one of the oldest tools as well, along with the hammer, of course, obviously is a little bit older, but the wheelbarrow is we can thank the Great Wall of China for that. So there were some of the smaller doors. There were also some smaller doors, and I don't see a really good example of some smaller doors. I don't see any small doors at all. don't really. Not a good example. But there are some smaller doors in the inner walls, and those smaller doors are meant for the flow of soldiers or the flow of people in and out. Where the larger doors, of course, they brought wagons and large objects in and out as well. The outer sides of the there were also so the Great Wall kind of winds through the mountainside, and there are places where the Great Wall wasn't necessary, and so they also used natural resources as barriers as well. So if they're running the Great Wall around, and all of a sudden they came to a river, they would not build over the river or through the river. They would just stop at that river because that's a natural. That's usually a natural stopping point for a barrier. Also, sometimes they used hills in mountainside. So if the mountain had a steep peak or a steep cliff, something like that, they wouldn't have a wall. They wouldn't put a section of the wall there because, of course, there isn't anybody climbing up those steep cliffs to get into China. Just it would be impossible. The next section we're going to go to is called the Samant I section, and if you're going from Jinshanling to Samant I, it's pretty obvious that the Samant I section has not been restored. The stones are very loose and the grass is growing tall along the trail, and you really feel like you take a step back in time when you look at the Samant I section, and you can see really good footage of really what it looks like overhead. In comparison to the other ones, it's very, a lot of the wall has also eroded, and some of the sidewalk or some of the paths are gone. The towers have been overgrown with plants and trees. And as I said in the beginning, this is one unique thing about the Great Wall of China, is that there's such an obvious transition between the different parts. Some parts are very nice and some parts are fully restored, and then some parts are not so nice, and some parts look like you're going back into the 3rd century BCE. So the Samant I section was constructed started construction about 656 BCE. It's the earliest known part of the wall, and it was built, as I said, 1656, and it's in the modern day Henan province. At the time, China was divided into small Waring states. This early wall, sometimes called the Rectangle Wall, was built to protect Chus state from their northern enemies. So Chus is just the name of what that state is. So soon other states built walls along their borders to protect themselves. So sometimes the large sections were built by dynasties and empires. Some of the smaller sections and older sections were actually built by states. So if you can imagine, I live in Ohio. I actually live in the northern tip of Ohio, right on the border of Michigan and Ohio. If you can imagine, so if we were in China, Ohio might have constructed a wall that goes along the northern edge of Ohio. Now, of course, our northern edge of Ohio, a lot of the northern edge of Ohio is Lake Erie. And so much like the Great Wall of China, we probably would have stopped at Lake Erie, and then we would have continued up near Ashtabula County, somewhere there's a little chunk of land up there that's not the lake. But then over towards Toledo and Lucas County, and then Fulton County and Williams County is all land, so there'd probably be a big stretch of wall there. And then the same with Indiana. Indiana would have this stretch of wall that goes up to protect themselves from Michigan. So the next up, we have another. If you look here, so in 221 BCE, the Emperor Qin Shi Huang gained control of a lot of different Chinese states. And so this is the start of the Qin Dynasty, Qin, and it goes from 221 BCE to 206 BCE. And so the Qin Dynasty started collecting all of these states, and then they started forming this dynasty. And so that's actually what we're at right now. This Samant I section actually was part of the section that was obtained by the Qin Dynasty. Qin decided he needed a huge wall to protect his new empire, so he sent hundreds and thousands of soldiers and workers to tear down the small walls that divided the states and built up to expand their rectangular wall into a long wall. 9 years later, the new wall was completed, and it spanned much of northern China, which this section is modern day Inner Mongolia, and it helped keep out the Jingzhu, which is a nomadic nomadic tribe. And there's very little of this wall remaining today because it was so old that most of it has deteriorated and crumbled. Next up over here in this section starts over here. So the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE to 24, the year 24 AD. And this is the longest stretch of the wall, and it was built in the reign of Han. And he was also worried about nomadic warriors from the north. So he extended the wall 6,000 miles into western China. Unlike Qin, however, Han had an additional goal. He wished to protect merchants from raiders as well. His dynasty relied heavily on trade with the lands to the west. This trade route became known as the Silk Road. It ran from Persia, which is present-day Iran, to the Han capital. So sometime we might have, if we study any history of China, we know the Silk Road is very important to Chinese history. So from AD, from 386 to 1368 AD, or CE, as historians would call it, for these 100 years, the wall was really either neglected or improved upon, depending on the might of the empire's enemies. So depending on how many enemies the empire had was dependent on what they were going to do with the land or with the wall. So Kublai Khan, which is one of the very famous Mongolian invaders, became the new emperor of China, and that was in the year 1271 CE. And he had no desire to maintain or expand the walls, as Mongolia and China became one empire under his extensive control. So it was kind of the time at which Kublai Khan was a Mongolian. He attacked, and remember at the beginning I said the reason why the wall was built is because they didn't want nomadic tribes coming from Mongolia and invading China. Well, he succeeded. So obviously when he became the Chinese emperor, he thought, we don't need this wall anymore. We're not going to tear it down or anything because that'll take too much money and time. But we'll just leave it and we'll kind of just let it go and kind of just let it deteriorate. Until, of course, a new emperor comes along. So the Ming Dynasty, one of the most famous dynasties of all of Chinese history, it was from the year 1368 to 1644. And so if we remember, the Kublai Khan started in 1271, and so 1368, so it was almost 100 years went by and nothing was going on with the Great Wall of China. Emperor Zhu Yangzhan took control back from the Mongols, and the Great Wall became an important line of defense once more. His empire was known as the Ming Dynasty, and it lasted over 200 years. During this time, the wall was made stronger with brick and stone, and not only did he fortify the wall along Chinese northern and western borders, he also built a semicircle wall around his new capital city of Beijing. Today, you can visit Ming's Wall, where it stands in many places across northern China. Ming's Wall always reminds me, this is awful, but there's a really good Chinese restaurant that I go to that's called Ming's Great Wall, is the name of the Chinese restaurant. That every time I think of Ming's Wall, I always think of that Chinese restaurant. So next up, we have the Gubeito Pass, and there's some visitors there that's giving the thumbs up to the picture. Those probably are the people that took all these pictures. Actually, the Gubeito Pass is slowly decaying. It poses no threat to any would-be enemy, and but of course it did back in the 1600s when it was popular. So the big question about the Great Wall of China is and historians ask this all the time: did the Great Wall really keep intruders away? And Kublai Khan was a perfect example, and it honestly didn't a whole lot. Historians state that it was easy to offer guards money and goods in order to get through the gates. When you make something this large, it's hard to have control over everybody that guards this entire large facility, this large fortress. So there are a lot of people that didn't really care whether or not anybody could walk through. And so if you offered a guard some money, they probably would just let you go through. And so once you get through, you might be a scout or a spy for some other tribe or some other country. And now you can really you can know exactly how to get through. You can say, hey, this section of the wall is not very good. There's a weak point. This section of the wall you can easily climb over. That kind of stuff. So it's an interesting. The Great Wall of China has become this cultural icon of China, rightfully so. It's a huge architectural feat. It took hundreds of years to complete. Some say it's still not complete, actually, but it didn't exactly do the best purpose of what it was actually built for. So by 1644, a lot of people within the walls started to revolt against their own emperor. The peasant army was allowing neighboring Manchuria to enter their land. The Manchus quickly established the Ming Dynasty, which lasted until 1911. In subsequent centuries, Chinese enemies no longer came from the north. The Great Wall of China could no longer protect its people. And so there was also this point of where you're kind of crumbling from the inside out, right? And the wall was never meant to keep Chinese people in. It was meant to keep people from out of China or from outside from coming in. And so when people from the inside start revolting, there's not much you can do about it, and the wall is not going to help much. So one of the biggest problems of the Great Wall of China today is decay. It's neglect. It takes a lot of money to be able to maintain this large of a wall. There are sections of the wall that have been repurposed or forgotten. Some of the sections people have made homes out of them, or businesses, or they've used the sections as structure. For example, some of the shaped bricks and stones have been hauled away to make building materials elsewhere. So you've got this huge chunk of wall. We no longer need a wall. Even in modern day technology, the wall would not do anything to keep people outside of China. It's not guarded anymore. So why not use part of the wall to build something else that is necessary? So that unfortunately has happened as well. And also sections have been cut out to have large roads come through. As modern technology takes over and we need places, we have to have roads in order to get shipped goods elsewhere and also to bring in goods. Why you have to tear down the wall, right? We have to go through the wall. It doesn't make sense to go around the wall. We have to tear down the wall. And so unfortunately that's happened. And natural elements have also wreaked havoc on the wall. So in 2009, pretty recently, just over 10 years ago, it was discovered that there was a section of wall that had been completely covered by sand. They didn't even know it was a section of the wall until they started uncovering this sand dune, and they discovered that, oh, it's part of the Great Wall of China right there. It's pretty crazy. And then, of course, conservation and tourism is huge part of the Great Wall of China too. The Chinese government, of course, is a communist government, and so they have invested in restoring large sections of the wall. You know, part of a communist society is great pride for your country, and what says better pride for a country than the Great Wall of China, right? Something you can see from outer space. That's huge, and so the Chinese government sees this, and they are trying to restore large sections. They're really trying to restore large sections that are closest to Beijing, because of course then you can use it for tourist attractions. If you can have people from Beijing just drive 15, 20, 30 minutes down the road, and you get to see this big, long, gorgeous piece of the Great Wall of China, then you can make a lot of money at tourist shops. You can make a lot of money at restaurants and hotels and everything else that tourists might bring in. So it's the battling. I think it's battling. Battling is about an hour drive, and it's the closest section to Beijing, and it's about an hour drive from Beijing, and it was rebuilt in the late 1950s, so it is surviving pretty well, and thousands of people visit the section every day. And in fact, in the 2008 Summer Olympics, which I don't know if you remember, that was in Beijing, China. Battling was actually used in the 2008 Summer Olympics. So it's pretty cool what they're doing. It's kind of it's nice to know that they're trying to support this huge piece of cultural heritage, and the fact that it needs all the help that it can get, because if it were all to decay and tear down and fall down, then a large part of the Chinese history is gone with it. So it's a good thing that the Chinese government is making an effort to restore it. Okay, so that is the end of our field trip today. I have enabled the chat box, so if anybody would like to ask a question, you can ask away. I will try to answer it. My Chinese history is, I haven't studied Chinese history in a really long time, but we'll see if I can try to answer it. I am also putting in the chat box, I have a short evaluation for these. It's only about 5 questions. I just want to know really who's watching these. And so I do ask, if you did watch it today, please take the evaluation. It'll only take you a couple minutes. Also, there's a section for comments or suggestions. I do look at these every week, and if there's any suggestions on where to go, I would love to know that as well. I usually look for a place to go on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I announce it on Wednesday. Also, if you're not involved in 4-H and you'd like to be involved in 4-H, feel free to take the evaluation. On the evaluation, in the comments section, leave your contact information, and I will contact you about joining 4-H. And I do appreciate anybody that joined me today. I'm going to stop recording.